The sirens were getting closer. I could hear them wailing through the living room window, cutting through the suffocating silence that had filled our house for weeks. My husband stood frozen in the doorway, his face drained of color, holding a stack of papers I'd just thrown at his chest. Behind him, 2 federal agents were climbing the porch steps. This was it. The moment everything I'd built for 30 years came crashing down. But let me back up, because 3 months earlier, I had no idea my life was a house of cards built on lies. 3 months ago, I was still living in what I thought was my American dream. Phoenix, Arizona, land of endless sunshine and retirement communities where people my age were supposed to be enjoying the fruits of their labor. Our house sat in a quiet neighborhood near Camelback Mountain, one of those ranch-style homes with a big backyard where I'd raised 6 children. 6. Do you have any idea what that means? 30 years of my life poured into diapers, homework, soccer practices, college applications. 30 years of putting everyone else first while my own dreams gathered dust in the back of my mind like forgotten furniture. My husband worked in commercial real estate. Good money, or so I thought. He handled all our finances because, well, that's how we did things. I focused on the home. Traditional, maybe. Naive? Absolutely. I remember the day my youngest finally moved out to Tucson for college. I stood in her empty bedroom, looking at the bare walls where her posters used to hang, and I felt this strange mixture of relief and terror. What now? Who was I without the constant chaos of raising children? My husband came home that night and found me sitting on the edge of her bed, crying. Not sad tears exactly. More like the tears you cry when you finish running a marathon and realize your legs don't work anymore. He stood in the doorway, his briefcase still in his hand, and said the words that should have been my first warning. You contributed nothing to this house. Just like that. Flat. Like he was commenting on the weather. I laughed it off. Can you believe that? I actually laughed and said something stupid like, well, who do you think raised your children? But the words stuck to me like oil. They seeped into my skin over the following weeks. You contribute nothing. Nothing. As if 3 decades of sacrifice were invisible. As if the life I'd built around his comfort and success meant less than the zeros in his bank account. I know you're probably screaming at your screen right now, telling me I should have seen the red flags. But here's the thing about love, or what I thought was love. It doesn't just make you blind. It paralyzes you. It makes you doubt your own reality until you're not even sure what you're seeing anymore. The thing is, I believed in forgiveness. My whole life, I'd been taught that family comes first. Blood is thicker than water, right? That's what my mother used to say before she passed. That's what I repeated to myself every time my husband's words cut a little deeper. Every time he dismissed my concerns about money or made me feel small for asking questions, I made excuses for him. He's stressed about work, I'd tell myself. He doesn't mean it. I convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. When did it start exactly? I've spent so many nights trying to pinpoint the moment things shifted. Maybe it was after our 4th child was born, when money got tighter and his temper got shorter. Or maybe it was always there, lurking beneath the surface. And I was too busy juggling responsibilities to notice. He started making all the financial decisions without consulting me. At first, I thought it was helpful, one less thing for me to worry about while I was drowning in childcare. But then it became a wall between us, a wall made of secrets and control. Looking back now, I can see how calculated it was. How he isolated me from our finances, made me feel incompetent whenever I asked questions. You wouldn't understand, he'd say. This is business. You focus on the kids. And I did. God help me, I did. I focused on the kids while he built an empire of lies with my name attached to it. The humiliation became my normal. That's the sick part, isn't it? You get used to swallowing your dignity like bitter medicine. When he called me useless in front of our adult children during a holiday dinner, I smiled and changed the subject. When he forgot our anniversary for the 3rd year in a row, I told myself material things didn't matter. When he started coming home later and later, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. 6 children. Do you know what I gave up to raise 6 children? I had dreams once. I wanted to be a teacher. I had 2 years of college under my belt before I got pregnant with our first. My husband promised I could go back to school later, when the kids were older. Later never came. There was always another mouth to feed, another crisis to manage, another reason why my dreams had to wait. I gave up my body. 6 pregnancies took their toll. The stretch marks, the extra weight I could never quite lose, the way my back ached from years of carrying children on my hip while cooking dinner with my free hand. I gave up sleep. Years of it, decades maybe, if you add up all those nights rocking crying babies, waiting up for teenagers who missed curfew, worrying about college tuition payments. And my dignity. Oh, I already mentioned that, didn't I? But it bears repeating because the loss was so complete, so total, that I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I accepted being called stupid, lazy, worthless. I accepted being blamed for everything that went wrong while getting credit for nothing that went right. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the rooms I'd spent years filling with love and sacrifice. The worst part? I thought this was normal. I thought every wife went through this, that marriage meant sublimating yourself until there was nothing left but service and silence. My friends at church seemed happy enough in their marriages, but now I wonder how many of them were wearing the same mask I was. How many of them went home to men who made them feel small? Then came the letter. A Tuesday afternoon in late September, still hot as hell in Phoenix. The mail came while I was doing laundry, which is basically what I was always doing. Laundry or dishes or some other endless, thankless task. I almost didn't open it because it looked official and boring, some government agency I'd never heard of. But something made me slice it open with a kitchen knife, and that's when my hands started shaking. It was from the IRS. They were flagging irregularities in our tax returns going back 5 years. Fraudulent deductions, they called them. Forged signatures. My signature, apparently, on documents I'd never seen, for business dealings I knew nothing about. Real estate transactions in my name that I'd never authorized. It was like reading about a stranger's life, except the stranger was supposed to be me. I sat down at the kitchen table, that letter trembling in my hands, and felt time stop. You know that feeling when you're in a car accident and everything goes into slow motion? That moment before impact when you realize something terrible is happening and there's nothing you can do to stop it? That's what this felt like. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The fluorescent light above the table buzzed like it always did, this annoying sound I'd learned to tune out, but suddenly it was deafening. I read the letter 3 times, then 4. Then I got up and found the box where my husband kept our important documents, locked in his home office. I'd never gone through it before. He always said I didn't need to worry about business stuff. But I found the key where he always left it, in his desk drawer, and I opened that box like I was defusing a bomb. Tax returns, business contracts, real estate deeds. And there, again and again, was my signature. Except it wasn't my signature, not really. It was close, but the loops were wrong, the pressure too heavy. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting, and that someone was my husband. I found a notepad in his desk with pages of practice signatures. My name, over and over, until he got it right. Have you ever had the ground disappear from under your feet? That's what betrayal feels like. Not anger at first, not even hurt. Just this vertiginous sense of falling through space with nothing to grab onto. I sat in his office chair, surrounded by evidence of his deception, and I couldn't even cry. I was too shocked, too numb. The documents showed everything. He'd been using my name to secure loans, to dodge taxes, to hide assets from creditors. He'd forged my signature on mortgage applications, on business contracts, on government forms. My name, the name I'd signed to permission slips and birthday cards and love letters when we were young, had become a tool for his financial crimes. I thought about confronting him right then. I imagined waiting for him to come home, spreading all the documents across the dining room table like evidence at a crime scene. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the last vestige of that belief in forgiveness and family that had kept me trapped for so long. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first stirring of something I hadn't felt in years: cold, calculating rage. That night, I made dinner like always. Chicken and rice, his favorite. I set the table, poured his wine, smiled when he came through the door complaining about traffic. I listened to him talk about his day, about difficult clients and market fluctuations, and I said nothing about what I'd found. I was a perfect actress. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The woman who had spent 30 years making excuses for him was starting to die, and someone new was being born in her place. After dinner, he went to his office to work, and I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. It was like seeing a stranger. When had I gotten so old? When had the lines around my mouth deepened into permanent frowns? My eyes looked hollow, haunted. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. And that's when I heard it, clear as day, echoing in my mind. "You contribute nothing to this house." His voice, his words. And suddenly I understood that I'd been hearing variations of that message for years. Every dismissal, every rolled eye, every time he'd made me feel stupid for asking about our finances. It was all part of the same pattern. He'd been systematically destroying my sense of self-worth so I wouldn't question him, so I wouldn't look too closely at what he was doing. The woman in the mirror looked like she was drowning, like she'd been drowning for years and had just now realized she could fight her way to the surface. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles white, and I made myself a promise. I was done drowning. I was done being invisible. I was done contributing nothing while he stole my life. But I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I'd been alone for too long already. The next morning, I called my spiritual counselor, Sister Margaret. I'd met her a few years back at a women's retreat I'd attended on a whim, during one of those rare weekends when my husband was traveling and I could escape. She ran a small ministry in downtown Phoenix, helping women in crisis. I'd never thought of myself as a woman in crisis before, but as I sat in my car outside her office, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized that's exactly what I was. Sister Margaret was in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through you. Not in a harsh way, more like she could see all the pain you were carrying and wanted to help you set it down. When I walked into her office that morning, clutching the folder of evidence I'd compiled, she took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. And that's when I finally broke. I cried for maybe 20 minutes straight, just sobbed into her shoulder like a child, all the grief and rage and fear pouring out of me in waves. She didn't say anything, just held me and let me cry. When I finally pulled away, she handed me a box of tissues and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the letter, the forged signatures, the decades of humiliation and control. I told her about feeling invisible, about sacrificing everything for a man who saw me as worthless. I showed her the documents, the evidence of his systematic betrayal, and she listened without judgment, without trying to fix it or minimize it. She just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You know what faith really is? It's not believing everything will be okay. It's believing you have the strength to survive even when things aren't okay." She leaned forward, her hands clasped on her desk. "You've already survived so much. You raised 6 children. You held your family together. You have more strength than you know. Now you just need to use it differently." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I felt so lost, so broken. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "He controls everything. The money, the house, the cars. Everything's in his name or tangled up in his business. How do I fight that?" That's when Sister Margaret told me about the others. "You're not the first woman to sit in that chair with this story," she said. "Elder abuse, Financial exploitation, it's more common than you think. And you know what? Some of them are fighting back. Together. She connected me with a support group of women who'd been scammed by their own families. We met in the basement of her church every Thursday night, a circle of folding chairs and terrible coffee and stories that would break your heart. There was Linda, whose son had stolen her retirement savings to feed a gambling addiction. There was Patricia, whose husband had mortgaged their house without telling her to cover business debts. There was Teresa, whose daughter-in-law had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage. Different details, same betrayal, same sense of having been made invisible, of having our sacrifices weaponized against us. We were an army of wounded women, and together we were learning to fight back. One of the women, Linda, was a retired paralegal. She taught us about financial power of attorney, about how to freeze credit, about reporting fraud to law enforcement. Another woman, Joyce, had worked in banking before she retired. She showed us how to trace financial transactions, how to document evidence, how to build a case. We pooled our knowledge and our resources, supporting each other through the legal maze none of us had ever expected to navigate. And the statistics we uncovered? They were staggering. The FBI recorded nearly 1,500 seniors as victims of real estate scams in just 2 years, 2023 to 2024. 1,500 that they knew about. How many more went unreported, hidden behind closed doors and family shame? How many women like us were too scared or too exhausted to fight back? I learned that what happened to me had a name: financial elder abuse. I learned that it's a crime, that forging signatures is fraud, that I had rights even if I'd never exercised them before. I learned that I wasn't stupid or weak or worthless. I was a victim of deliberate manipulation, and that wasn't my fault. But learning about it and doing something about it were two different things. I went home every night to a man who had no idea I knew what he'd done. I made his dinner. I did his laundry. I slept in the same bed, careful not to touch him, feeling like I was sharing space with a stranger, a dangerous stranger. Sister Margaret kept reminding me about faith. Not the blind faith I'd relied on for years, the kind that kept me trapped in denial, but a different kind. Faith that truth matters, that justice is possible, that God doesn't want us to be doormats for people who claim to love us. Jesus overturned tables in the temple, she reminded me once. Sometimes righteous anger is the most faithful response. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every transaction I could find, every lie I caught him in. I opened my own bank account at a different institution, one he didn't know about, and started saving money from the household budget. $20 here, $50 there. It added up slowly, but it was mine. My escape fund, my freedom money. The other women in the group taught me how to be strategic. Don't confront until you have your ducks in a row, they said. Don't tip your hand until you're ready for the fallout. Gather evidence, secure your finances, have a plan. So that's what I did. For weeks, I played the dutiful wife while building my case brick by brick. It was exhausting, living a double life like that, smiling at dinner while fury burned in my chest, asking about his day while memorizing his lies, pretending everything was normal while plotting my escape. But I was good at pretending, wasn't I? I'd been pretending for 30 years that I was happy, that I was valued, that my marriage was worth preserving. The hardest part was seeing him interact with our adult children, playing the role of devoted father while I knew what he'd done. Our oldest, Michael, called one Sunday to check in, and my husband spent 20 minutes on the phone talking about how proud he was, how he'd sacrificed so much to give them all a good life. I listened from the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, and wanted to scream. "Your father is a liar," I wanted to shout into the phone. "Everything he told you is built on fraud and forged signatures." But I stayed quiet. Not yet. Not until I was ready. During one Thursday night meeting, Patricia shared something that stuck with me. She said, "For years, I thought keeping my mouth shut was protecting my family. But you know what I was really doing? I was protecting my abuser. I was choosing his comfort over my own safety, over my own sanity. And that's not love. That's not loyalty. That's just fear. She was right. I'd been so afraid of conflict, of financial instability, of being alone, of what people would think. I'd let fear run my life for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to make a choice based on anything else. But now, surrounded by women who'd found the courage to fight back, I was starting to remember, starting to hope. One night, I couldn't sleep. I got up around 2 a.m. and went to the kitchen for water. The house was dark and quiet, and I stood at the window looking out at the desert landscape, the saguaro cacti silhouetted against the starlit sky. I thought about all those years, all that sacrifice, and I felt the weight of it crushing me. But I also felt something new. Determination. Resolve. The beginning of something that felt almost like power. I pulled out my phone and started typing an email. Not to send yet, but to draft, to have ready. I attached copies of the forged documents, the tax letter, the evidence I'd compiled. I wrote it all out. What he'd done, how long I'd known, what I planned to do about it. I addressed it to my husband, but I BCC'd my lawyer, the IRS investigator, my adult children, Sister Margaret. When the time came to send it, everyone would know at once. No more secrets, no more hiding behind shame and silence. The cursor blinked at me in the darkness. "Are you sure you want to do this?" it seemed to ask. "Once you send this, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same." I saved the draft and went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to my husband snore beside me, and I thought about the woman in the mirror. The drowning woman. She was still there, still struggling. But she was fighting her way up now, reaching for the surface, refusing to go quietly into the dark. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday. I'd planned it for a Saturday, actually, when I knew our kids would be available to talk, when Sister Margaret could be on standby for emotional support. But life doesn't always follow your timeline, does it? Sometimes the universe decides it's time whether you're ready or not. It was research that uncovered the final piece, something that made me understand that waiting wasn't an option anymore. I was digging through more documents in his office. He'd gone to play golf, giving me a rare few hours alone, when I found correspondence with his accountant about a new property deal. They were planning to use my name again, to forge my signature on a mortgage application for a commercial property in Scottsdale. The closing was scheduled for Friday. 2 days away, they were going to do it again. Even after the IRS letter, even after the investigation had started, he was planning to commit more fraud in my name. The audacity of it took my breath away. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was clarity. The absolute certainty that this man would never stop, would never change, would keep using me until there was nothing left to take. I sat in his office chair, staring at the email chain between him and his accountant, and I felt something snap inside me. Not break, exactly. More like a chain falling away, a lock opening. I pulled out my phone and opened the draft email I'd written weeks ago, updated it with the new information about the pending fraud, took a deep breath, and hit send. The email went out at 2:30 in the afternoon. By 3, my phone was ringing. Michael first, then Sarah, then the others in quick succession. I let it go to voicemail. I'd talk to them later, explain everything, answer their questions. But first, I needed to be here when their father came home. I needed to see his face when he realized what I'd done. He walked through the door at 5:15, his golf bag over his shoulder, whistling some tune I didn't recognize. I was sitting at the dining room table with my laptop open, the email displayed on the screen. Next to it, I'd stacked every piece of evidence: tax documents, forged signatures, the IRS letter, bank statements, the correspondence about the Scottsdale property. A tower of his crimes, neatly organized. He saw me and smiled. Actually smiled. "Hey, hun, what's for dinner? I'm starving." Like it was just another day. Like he hadn't been systematically destroying my life for years. I didn't respond, just turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. watched his face as he read the subject line. Evidence of financial fraud and elder abuse. Watched the color drain from his cheeks as he scrolled down, seeing the recipient list: our children, our lawyer, the IRS, the FBI field office in Phoenix. "What is this?" His voice cracked. "What did you do?" "What did I do?" I stood up, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded, how steady. "I stopped you from committing fraud in my name again. I stopped you from ruining whatever's left of my life. I stopped contributing nothing and started protecting everything." He tried to grab the laptop, but I'd already closed it. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "This is business. You don't know anything about business. You're going to ruin us. You're going to ruin everything I've built." "Everything you've built?" I laughed, and it came out sharp and bitter. "You built it with my name, with my signature that you forged, with my dignity that you ground into dust. So, yeah, maybe I am ruining it. Good." He started making excuses then, spinning stories. It was all a misunderstanding. He was protecting me from the stress of financial decisions. He only did it because he loved me, because he wanted to provide for our family. On and on, the same manipulation tactics that had worked for 30 years. But I was done listening. "I want you out of this house," I said. "Tonight. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You have 1 hour to pack a bag and leave, or I'm calling the police and reporting you for forging government documents. Your choice." That's when he got angry. Really angry. Started yelling about how I was nothing without him, how I'd never survive on my own, how I was too stupid to understand what I was throwing away. And you know what? I felt nothing. His words bounced off me like rain off glass. The woman who used to absorb every insult, who used to believe his cruelty was somehow deserved, she was gone, dead, and good riddance. My phone buzzed. A text from Sister Margaret. "Police on standby if you need them. You are not alone." I'd told her what I was planning, and she'd arranged for backup, just in case. I showed him the text. "You have 55 minutes now. I suggest you start packing." He left, grabbed a suitcase from the bedroom, threw some clothes in it, all while muttering threats under his breath about lawyers and divorce and how I'd regret this. I stood in the doorway and watched him go, his car peeling out of the driveway like he was in a movie. And then the house was quiet. Really quiet, for the first time in 30 years. I sat down on the couch and waited for the tears to come, but they didn't. Instead, I felt this strange sense of lightness, like I'd been carrying a boulder on my back and had finally set it down. My phone kept buzzing, calls from the kids, texts from the women's group, an email from my lawyer confirming she'd received my evidence. I'd deal with it all later. For now, I just sat in the quiet and breathed. The FBI agents came 2 days later. Not to arrest me, thank God, but to interview me about the fraud. They were professional, efficient, focused. They asked questions, took copies of my documents, thanked me for coming forward. One of them, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me, said something I'll never forget. "You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." The investigation took months. During that time, my husband's entire financial empire unraveled. Turns out I wasn't the only victim. He'd scammed business partners, investors, even his own siblings. The documents I'd provided were the thread that, when pulled, revealed a whole tapestry of fraud and deception. The FBI found forged signatures on dozens of contracts, tax evasion schemes, money laundering through shell companies. He'd been running a one-man crime spree for over a decade, and I'd been his unwitting accomplice. Among neglected seniors, I learned, the 1-year mortality rate is 54 times higher than among non-neglected seniors. 54 times. Let that sink in. The stress, the isolation, the constant state of fear and anxiety, it literally kills people. I thought about my own health, how I'd been having chest pains for years, how I'd stopped sleeping properly. how I'd aged a decade in the past 5 years alone. I was lucky to be alive, lucky to have found the courage to fight back before it killed me. Our adult children were devastated. Some believed me right away, especially the daughters who'd seen glimpses of how he treated me over the years. Others needed time, needed to see the evidence, needed to reconcile the father they thought they knew with the criminal he actually was. It was hardest on Michael, our oldest, who'd gone into business with his dad and now had to grapple with the possibility that his entire career was built on fraud. I had to have hard conversations, answer painful questions, watch my children work through their own grief and anger and confusion. But I never regretted sending that email, not once. Even when Sarah called me crying, asking why I couldn't have just talked to Dad first, worked it out privately. Even when Michael accused me of destroying the family out of spite, I stood firm. This wasn't spite. This was survival. The legal case built slowly but steadily. My husband hired an expensive defense attorney who tried every trick in the book, claiming I'd consented to the signatures, that I'd known about the business dealings all along, that I was a vindictive ex-wife trying to destroy a good man. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic analysis of the signatures alone was damning. And when they started interviewing his business associates, more victims came forward. The walls closed in. Meanwhile, the women's group rallied around me. We'd meet every Thursday, and they'd check in, make sure I was okay, celebrate small victories. Linda helped me freeze my credit and set up fraud alerts. Patricia connected me with a financial advisor who helped me understand what assets I could protect in the divorce. Joyce was just there, week after week, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Sister Margaret became my anchor in a different way. When I'd get overwhelmed, when the weight of it all threatened to pull me under, I'd call her. She never offered platitudes or easy answers. She just reminded me of my strength, of how far I'd come, of the faith that was carrying me through. Not blind faith anymore. Clear-eyed faith. The kind that sees the truth and chooses hope anyway. The trial happened 9 months after I sent that email. 9 long months of depositions and legal filings and sleepless nights. But when it finally came, I was ready. I sat in that courtroom, surrounded by my daughters and Sister Margaret and the women from the group, and I testified. I told the truth about 30 years of manipulation and control and systematic abuse. I showed the jury the documents, the forged signatures, the pattern of fraud, and I looked my husband in the eye when I said, "He stole more than my money. He stole my dignity, my sense of self, my faith in my own worth, and I'm here to take it back." The verdict came back guilty on multiple counts: fraud, forgery, elder abuse, tax evasion. The judge was an older woman, probably close to my age, and when she delivered the sentence, I swear I saw something like satisfaction in her eyes. 3 years in federal prison, restitution of all stolen funds, permanent restraining order. Justice, at least on paper. But here's the thing about legal justice. It's necessary, but it's not enough. Because even after the verdict, even after he was led away in handcuffs, I still had to rebuild my life. I still had to figure out who I was without the role I'd played for 30 years. I still had to heal from wounds that went deeper than any court could address. The community response was mixed. Some people were supportive, proud of me for standing up to abuse. Others thought I'd overreacted, that I should have handled it privately, that airing our dirty laundry in public was shameful. I lost some friends, people who couldn't reconcile the narrative they'd believed about my marriage with the reality I'd exposed. But I gained new ones too. Women who came out of the woodwork with their own stories of financial abuse, of husbands who controlled the money and used it to control them. My church community, surprisingly, was split. Some members rallied around me, organizing meal trains and support groups. But others whispered that I was breaking my marriage vows, that divorce was a sin, that I should forgive and reconcile. Sister Margaret shut that down fast. Where in Scripture does it say you have to enable crime? she asked during one particularly tense meeting. Where does it say you sacrifice yourself on the altar of someone else's sins? The family dynamics shifted in ways I'm still processing. My daughters grew closer to me, finally understanding things they'd witnessed but never fully grasped. My sons struggled more, caught between loyalty to their father and the evidence of his crimes. Holidays became complicated. Who do you invite when half the family thinks you're a hero and the other half thinks you're a villain? But through it all, I kept going to Thursday night meetings, kept showing up for myself and for the other women fighting similar battles. We became a sisterhood forged in shared trauma and mutual support. When Linda's case went to trial, we all showed up to support her. When Patricia's daughter-in-law tried to manipulate her into dropping charges, we helped her stay strong. We were warriors, all of us, fighting battles nobody should have to fight. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Even from prison, my husband fought me on every point: the house, the retirement accounts, the division of assets. His lawyer argued that I'd benefited from his fraud, that I should be held partially responsible. My lawyer argued that I was a victim, that I deserved compensation for 30 years of unpaid labor and systematic abuse. It took another year to settle, but eventually I got the house, half the legitimate assets, and my freedom. Financial freedom, it turns out, is a strange thing when you've never had it before. I had to learn how to manage money, how to make decisions about investments and budgets and savings. I made mistakes, trusted the wrong financial advisor initially, almost got scammed by a predatory reverse mortgage company. But I learned, got better at it, started to actually understand the business world my husband had kept me from for so long. And then, slowly, I started to focus on something I'd neglected even more than my finances: my health. 30 years of stress had taken a real toll: high blood pressure, chronic pain, anxiety that sometimes left me paralyzed. I started small, walking in the mornings, trying yoga at a senior center, seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma. It felt indulgent at first, spending time and money on myself. But Sister Margaret reminded me that self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's survival. The physical transformation came gradually. I lost some weight, not because I was trying to, but because stress eating stopped when the source of stress was gone. My back pain improved with regular exercise. I slept better, ate better, felt better. But the mental transformation was even more profound. Therapy helped me understand the patterns of abuse I'd endured, the gaslighting and manipulation and control. It helped me see that none of it was my fault. I started doing things I'd never done before. Took a watercolor painting class at the community college, joined a book club, went to the Grand Canyon with the women's group for a weekend getaway. Small things, but they felt revolutionary. I was making choices based on what I wanted, not what someone else needed. I was discovering who I was when I wasn't defined by service and sacrifice. One morning, about 18 months after that initial confrontation, I woke up and realized I was happy. Not giddy or ecstatic, but content, peaceful. I made coffee and sat on my back porch watching the sun rise over the desert, and I felt grateful to be alive. Grateful for the chance to rebuild. Grateful for the women who'd supported me. Grateful even for the pain that had forced me to change. My relationship with my children continued to heal. Michael eventually came around, especially after his own financial review revealed how his father had been using their business to launder money. Sarah apologized for doubting me, for not seeing the signs sooner. My other kids, each in their own way, worked through their feelings and found their way back to me. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Honest in a way our family had never been before. The women's group expanded. What started as 6 of us meeting in a church basement grew into an organization with multiple chapters across Arizona. We started a website, a hotline, support groups in Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff. We lobbied for stronger elder abuse laws, testified before the state legislature, partnered with law enforcement to train officers on recognizing financial exploitation. We turned our pain into purpose. I even started speaking publicly about my experience. At first, it terrified me. Standing in front of strangers, admitting what I'd been through, making myself vulnerable all over again. But Sister Margaret was right when she said our stories have power. Every time I spoke, women would come up to me afterward with tears in their eyes saying, "That's my story too," or "You just gave me the courage to leave." One woman, probably in her 70s, grabbed my hands after a presentation and said, "I've been making excuses for my son for 20 years. He's stolen from me, lied to me, treated me like an ATM machine. And I kept telling myself it was my fault, that I'd failed as a mother. But hearing your story, maybe it's not my fault. Maybe I deserve better." She called me a month later to say she'd reported him to the police. She sounded terrified, but also alive in a way she hadn't been in years. That's when I understood what rebirth really means. It's not just about leaving the bad situation. It's not even about seeking justice or getting revenge. It's about reclaiming your right to exist as a full person with needs and wants and dreams. It's about refusing to be invisible anymore. I started volunteering with Sister Margaret's ministry, helping other women navigate the legal and financial maze of escaping abuse. I used everything I'd learned, the mistakes I'd made, the resources I'd discovered, the strategies that had worked. I became the person I'd needed when I was drowning, throwing life preservers to women who were where I used to be. My health continued to improve. The chronic pain that had plagued me for years started to fade. My blood pressure normalized. I had more energy, more vitality. My therapist explained that trauma lives in the body, and healing trauma requires more than just mental work. It requires movement, breath work, releasing the physical tension that abuse creates. So I kept going to yoga, kept walking, kept moving my body in ways that felt good. I also started reclaiming my mind. I'd always loved reading, but my husband used to mock me for it, calling it a waste of time. So I'd stopped, or only read in stolen moments when he wasn't around. Now I devoured books. Memoirs of other survivors, books on psychology and trauma, novels that transported me to different worlds. I joined the book club at the library and found a community of women who valued ideas and discussion and intellectual growth. One day, I enrolled in a class at Phoenix Community College. Just one class, Introduction to Psychology. I wasn't trying to get a degree or start a new career. I just wanted to learn, to challenge my brain, to prove to myself that I could. That first day, sitting in a classroom full of people decades younger than me, I felt ridiculous. But by the end of the semester, I'd earned an A and discovered I actually loved academic work. The thing about reclaiming your life is that it's not one big moment. It's 1,000 small choices, 1,000 tiny rebellions against the voice in your head that still sometimes whispers, "You contribute nothing." It's signing up for the class. It's saying no to something you don't want to do. It's spending money on yourself without guilt. It's choosing your own life over someone else's comfort. I'm not going to lie and say it was all smooth sailing. There were hard days, days when I missed the simplicity of my old life, even though it was killing me. Days when I questioned whether the fight had been worth it. Days when I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of managing my own life after 30 years of being managed. But those days got fewer and farther between. And then there were moments of pure joy that I'd never experienced before. Dancing in my kitchen to music I chose, redecorating my bedroom in colors I loved, planning a trip to see my daughter in Seattle without asking anyone's permission, sleeping in on a Saturday morning. These tiny freedoms that most people take for granted felt like miracles to me. My financial situation stabilized. I was never going to be rich, but I had enough to pay my bills, to save for emergencies, to occasionally splurge on something frivolous. I hired a financial planner who I actually trusted, who explained things to me instead of condescending or gatekeeping. I learned about investments and retirement accounts and estate planning. I took control. The relationship with my ex-husband remained non-existent, which was fine by me. He was released from prison after serving 2 years, and I heard through the kids that he'd moved to Nevada, was working some menial job, still playing the victim, still telling anyone who'd listen that I'd destroyed his life out of spite. I felt nothing when I heard that. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing. He'd become irrelevant to my story. What mattered more was what I'd built in his absence, the friendships, the purpose, the sense of self. I'd spent 30 years as someone's wife, someone's mother, never just as myself. And now, finally, I was discovering who that person was. She was stronger than I'd imagined, braver, more capable, more deserving of love and respect and basic human dignity. Looking back now, 3 years after that confrontation in my dining room, I can see how far I've come. The woman who sat at that table, hands shaking as she hit send on that email, she was terrified but determined. The woman I am now is still determined but no longer terrified. I know my worth. I know my rights. I know I deserve better than crumbs of affection from someone who sees me as a tool to be used. Did I get everything I wanted? No. I wanted my children to immediately believe me, support me without question. That didn't happen. I wanted my community to rally around me without judgment. Some did, some didn't. I wanted my husband to feel genuine remorse, to understand the harm he'd caused. As far as I know, he never did. But I got something more important than any of that. I got myself back. The self that had been buried under years of servitude and abuse and self-sacrifice. The self that had dreams and opinions and a voice. The self that deserved to take up space in the world. And I got a purpose. Helping other women, sharing my story, fighting for stronger protections against elder abuse. This work gives my life meaning in a way that service to an abusive man never did. It's service too, but it's service I choose, service that flows from abundance rather than obligation. If you told me 5 years ago that this is where I'd end up, divorced, financially independent, speaking publicly about my trauma, helping other women escape abuse, I wouldn't have believed you. It would have seemed impossible, terrifying, too hard. But here I am, living proof that it's possible to start over, even when you think it's too late. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. Something that might help you or someone you love who's going through something similar. Emotional abuse isn't just words. It's not just being called names or being yelled at, though those things are certainly part of it. Emotional abuse is a systematic process of breaking down your sense of reality, your confidence, your belief in your own worth. It's designed to make you doubt yourself so completely that you become dependent on your abuser for your sense of identity. The physical and mental toll of this kind of abuse is very real and very serious. Research shows that victims of long-term emotional abuse often develop symptoms identical to those of post-traumatic stress disorder. We're not talking about just feeling sad or stressed. We're talking about actual changes in brain chemistry, chronic inflammation, cardiovascular problems, immune system suppression. I experienced all of this. The chest pains I mentioned weren't just anxiety. They were my body's stress response causing actual cardiac issues. The chronic pain in my back and joints wasn't just aging. It was my body holding tension from years of fear and hypervigilance. The insomnia, the digestive problems, the brain fog, all of it was my body breaking down under the weight of sustained abuse. And here's what's really important. These health impacts don't magically disappear when you leave the abusive situation. They require active healing. Therapy, yes, but also physical care. Movement and nutrition and sleep and sometimes medication. You can't just willpower your way out of trauma's physical effects. I want you to understand that if you're in a situation like I was, your body is trying to tell you something. Listen to it. Those stress headaches, that tightness in your chest, that exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, those are warning signs. Your body knows you're not safe even when your mind is still making excuses. Learn the warning signs of financial abuse specifically, because that's often how elder abuse manifests. Does someone else control all your money? Are you kept in the dark about financial decisions that affect you? Are you made to feel stupid or incompetent when you ask questions about finances? Have documents been signed without your knowledge or consent? These are red flags. Understand that isolation is a deliberate tactic. Abusers work to cut you off from friends, family, resources, anything that might give you perspective or support. If you're finding yourself increasingly alone, if the person who claims to love you is systematically removing other people from your life, that's not love. That's control. Know your legal rights. In most states, including Arizona, elder financial abuse is a crime. Forging someone's signature is fraud, period, even if that someone is your spouse. You have the right to access your own financial information, to make your own decisions, to report crimes committed against you. You don't need anyone's permission to protect yourself. Document everything. I can't stress this enough. Keep records, take screenshots, make copies. If something feels wrong, write it down with dates and details. You may need that evidence later, and memory is unreliable, especially when you're being gaslit. I started a private journal where I recorded every incident, every lie, every manipulation. That journal became crucial evidence. Build a support network before you need it. I was lucky to find Sister Margaret and the women's group, but don't wait until you're in crisis. Connect with people now. Join a church or community group. Maintain friendships. Have at least one person in your life who knows the truth about what you're going through. Isolation makes everything harder. If you're helping someone in this situation, understand that they may not be ready to leave yet. Don't judge them for staying. The average victim of domestic abuse tries to leave 7 times before they succeed. There are complex reasons for this: financial dependency, fear, trauma bonding, cultural or religious beliefs, concern for children or grandchildren. Your job isn't to force them out. Your job is to be a consistent presence, a safe person they can turn to when they're ready. Also know that the most dangerous time for a victim is when they leave or threaten to leave. That's when abusers escalate, when they realize they're losing control. I was fortunate that my husband chose to leave quietly rather than escalate to violence, but not everyone is that lucky. If you're planning to leave an abusive situation, make a safety plan. Have somewhere to go, money set aside, important documents secured, a support system in place. Understand that recovery is a process, not an event. Leaving was just the first step. Healing has taken years and is still ongoing. I still have triggers, certain tones of voice, certain phrases, certain situations that send me right back to that place of fear and helplessness. But I have tools now to manage those triggers. I have a therapist, a support group, coping strategies. I have the knowledge that it's a trauma response, not a reflection of my current reality. And please understand that you deserve better. I don't care how old you are, how long you've been in the relationship, how much you've sacrificed, what you did or didn't do. You deserve to be treated with basic human dignity. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve to have agency over your own life. You deserve to be seen and heard and valued. Your contributions do matter, even if someone has spent years telling you they don't. Raising children matters. Maintaining a home matters. Emotional labor matters. All the invisible work that keeps families and relationships functioning, it matters. Just because it's not paid doesn't mean it's worthless. Just because it's not valued by one person doesn't mean it has no value. I spent 30 years believing I contributed nothing because that's what I was told. But I raised 6 children into functional adults. I created a home. I provided emotional support, managed a household, facilitated my husband's career by handling everything else. That's not nothing. That's enormous. And the fact that it was weaponized against me doesn't diminish its value. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. It's never too late to reclaim your life. I was in my 60s when I finally found the courage to leave. I thought I was too old to start over, too dependent, too damaged. I was wrong. Age is not a barrier to change. Neither is fear. Neither is the sunk cost of years invested in the wrong relationship. You are stronger than you think. You are more capable than you've been told. You deserve more than what you're getting. And there are people who will help you if you reach out. Organizations, lawyers, counselors, support groups, they exist. Use them. That's what they're there for. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know this was a long story and probably a difficult one to hear, but I hope it helps someone. I hope it opens someone's eyes to their own situation. I hope it gives someone the courage to take that first step toward freedom. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Drop a comment and let me know. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or see something differently, please consider leaving a like. It helps more people find these stories. What would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted him differently, left sooner, handled the legal process another way? I'm genuinely curious about your perspective, so please share your thoughts in the comments. Your insights might help someone else who's going through something similar. And if you found value in this story, please subscribe to the channel. I share these stories not for sympathy or attention, but because I believe they matter. I believe that speaking truth about abuse and trauma and recovery can save lives. Every subscription helps us reach more people who need to hear that they're not alone. I'd also suggest watching my story about financial recovery after divorce, or the one about rebuilding relationships with adult children after family trauma. Both of those might give you additional perspective on the healing process. Until the next story, take care of your heart, protect